Great.
Well, welcome to the April 18th, 2023 session of Tangerine SDR and Hamside Technical Session. My name is Dave, KV0S, and this week I've been building a kit and dodging lightning bolts and keeping my antennas working. So that's about it. So we're getting ready for Hamvention in the Tapper group, as Dan can attest. We had a meeting this week, so things are moving forward. And that's about it for me. Next on the list is Nathaniel, W2NAF.
Thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate it. It's been a busy week as always here. I've got 5 million projects up in the air, it feels like, but it's moving along. I guess number one thing, I'm very happy to see Tom back here this week. He can probably talk a little later. He had a rough week a week or so ago, but I'm really glad to see him on, and that's really good. And he sent some very positive notes here that I think can help move the project along. And I'm sure he can talk about that as well. Also, I did get to speak to Scotty today. And so Scotty gave me the phone number for the Intel rep. So I left a message for the Quartus representative today to try and get those licenses, get a quote for those licenses moving along. So I'm working on that. I got to speak to Dylan Romero on last week. I think it was a grape meeting. I saw him at one of the telecons last week. I think it was the grape one. And he actually sounds like he's in a pretty good spot to be giving a talk in person. So
yes,
it will not be recorded. It will be an in-person talk. It sounded like he had a good plan. So I'm not too worried about that. I think he shows up later, we can encourage him to give a practice run for our group before Hamvention, but I think he'll be a good speaker. So I think aside from that, we're trying with things with the grape group. The grape version 2 is, it is coming along, but again, there are some delays that I'm a little concerned about it really being ready in time for the October eclipse. So we're developing a plan to deploy grape version 1s, the new version 1.12s, to get those out in time for the eclipse, which we will be able to do some, working on getting that going. And I think that's pretty much where we are right now. So back to net.
Okay. Next on the list, we have Bill, AB4 EJ. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Good evening. I don't have anything to report on this project tonight.
Okay. And next on the list, we have Mike, AAAK. Go ahead, Mike.
Greetings to everyone listening. Back to you, Dave.
Okay. And next on the list, we have Bob, N5BRG. Go ahead, Bob.
Hello, everybody. Doing fine here. I discovered some magnetometers on the Tapper website. So I placed an order for one of those. We'll see what comes along there. Pretty excited to see that. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Back to you, Dave.
Well, those are the magnetometers that were left over from the HAMSI meeting. I think they had about 20 of them there. And we're in the transition from the Tapper store moving from Alabama to Michigan. And by Dayton, the transition should be completed. So after, and we're also in a process of reworking the website to get rid of some problems that we've been having. So anyway, there's lots of things in flux at Tapper. So just to let you know, but I'm sure you'll get your order.
Yeah, I think it was already shipped, actually.
Yeah. Um, I'm not 100% sure where they are right at this moment, as far as whether they're in Alabama or Michigan or in between in Dayton, because John Ackerman hit them for a while. So anyway, next on the list, we have Dan in for XWE. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Dave, and hello, everyone. Just wanted to mention, I don't think I've told anybody this before, but I actually, for the last couple of years, have been running an FPGA programming project. It's me and a couple of hardware developers and a couple of firmware writers. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I'm not a firmware coder, but I do know a lot about FPGAs. So if I can be of any help in that area, let me know. Anyway, back to you, Dave.
Okay, very good. Next on the list, we have Dave, AC2GL. Go ahead, Dave.
There it is.
Yes.
Hi, I'm just kind of curious in the project and don't know what I have to offer. I'm system safety, reliability, maintainability, testability, prognostics, you know, that sort of thing for mostly aerospace and defense. Really have no background in FPGAs or anything, but gosh, they're doing some amazing stuff with them. Anyway, I just wanted to follow the project, the progress of the project here.
Well, welcome.
Innocent
And-
bystander, I guess.
Yes. Well, welcome, and we hope you come back. And I like your eyeball.
I just thought I'd look around.
Yes. So next on the list, we have David in one HAC. Go ahead, David.
Good evening, everyone. The professional projects are moving along, and in particular, I will mention AM Doppler. We're getting our students to put machines together to expand out that system, and looking forward to having that up and ready to capture eclipses. Other things going on. Interesting thing. Well, first, weather. We've had interesting weather. We had several days of summer. Now we're back to something more fitting spring, but we had gotten up to 90 almost, which is a little unusual. In fact, we made records across the state 2 days in a row this past week. The other thing is we've had very strong winds, and brought a tree down on top of one of my PVC loop antennas, and amazing how the aim of a tree to be able to come down right on top of something. But I guess that's part of what ham is, being in the radio business is all about.
That's called
Murphy's law of radio.
Yeah, that's
tree will
Murphy's.
come down on your antenna.
Yeah, that's Murphy's law of selective gravitation.
Yes.
I remember being told that all antennas are temporary.
Right.
Yes.
That's true. Yeah, so are we. But
Yeah.
anyway, been interesting, but I guess back to net.
Okay. Next on the list is Gary, AF8A. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, everyone. I thought I'd put my eyeglass back up to match Dave's eyeball. I think we make a good pair. Yeah, I'm very happy tonight because I just finished a painting project that I started prior to the workshop. It was a pretty involved project. And so I can, once I put my workshop back together tomorrow, I can start focusing on some ham size stuff again. Somebody mentioned the Xenia Hamvention a little bit earlier. My goal is to get the Hamvention page up and running 1 month before the Ham Fest. So I've got 2 more days left to do that. So expect an email and the listserv, I think, on Wednesday. And that'll have the details of where we'll be at and who will be there and who can sign up to be at the booth and all that kind of stuff. So that's it's next on my list. Back to Nut.
Very good. And next on the list, we have Hillman, KC2 MCR. Go ahead, Hillman.
Yeah, hello everyone. Not so much to report other than the data portal project that we are still working on. We are making progress, but slow. I guess mainly because students are busy with classes and stuff. And I've been sick for two weeks, so I haven't been really functional. So, right, that's all. Back to the net.
Sorry for being sick, but glad to have you back.
Yeah, thanks.
And next on the list is Joe, W7LUX.
Good evening, everyone. The grape is plugging along. Nothing very unusual here the last week or two. Before that, though, we did have a pretty good solar storm. And like David, I think we had a lot of wind here and knocked an awful lot of branches off trees and knocked a tree down. So I'm having to chop up trees and get them ready for disposal. Everybody have a good time. W7LUX.
Very good. Sounds like you always have outdoor chores to do.
Yeah, the most of the snow is melted, which is very welcome. But
Yes.
now it's all running downhill and causing minor flooding down south of us.
Yes. Well, next on the list is Jonathan, KC3EEY. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. I had quite a busy 2 weeks. So I've been plugging along on an article, at least the figures and getting them presentable. It's always hard to come up with a way to display information. Also, there was I wanted to get some information on how to properly install an H-field receiver. Properly meaning the kind of alignment, whether it should be along the cardinal directions or some other orientation. But in terms of VLFRX tools, it doesn't really matter because antenna synthesis can be achieved at any orientation, which is good. I spoke to Morris Cohen, one of the rock stars of VLF research, and he also aligns his H-field loops along cardinal directions. So does Paul, the author of VLFRX tools. So I had an in-depth discussion with him about how to about the installation, and then that led to an in-depth discussion of calibration of your VLF receivers. He discussed phase equalization and also amplitude calibration. Both a fairly involved process. What he was able to do, he actually built a VLF calibrator, which is a box with a U-Blocks GPS, and it generates, so the U-Blocks GPS will actually generate the required frequencies, and
the way it's done is that when you set the GPS to generate a certain frequency, and then at least for the amplitude cal, the timing is also very important. And then so back on your VLF receiver, you would use the software and extract the signal according to the times that the signal was present, and then measurements could be made that way. And he will be releasing his calibration software or his program and a procedure on a buffer circuit that he uses for taking the signal from the GPS and either sending it to an E-field antenna or an H-field loop. So I'm actually quite excited about that because I'll be able to actually get a phase and amplitude cal on my VLF receivers. Lastly, I was looking at some papers, and it gave me some ideas about experiments that can be done for the solar eclipse. One of them was to monitor signals from VLF transmitters and see how well they work against LWPC modeling. LWPC is a model used for VLF propagation. Some of the parameters were changed a little bit to account for eclipse conditions, but there was a paper that I was reading where they agreed quite well according to the recorded data. So I was thinking, because I'm also familiar with LWPC, and I was able to get it to run on my server, I could hopefully create those same models, and hopefully my data will agree, and then I could write a paper. Also, there was a paper about tweaks during the daytime. Normally, tweaks are visible at night, or are observable at night, but there are some that are observable during the day, but they're rare. Well, or they don't happen often, and their frequency dispersion is much less. But what I wanted to do was compare tweaks during the eclipse versus daytime tweaks. And based on the tweaks dispersion, you could calculate their reflection height. And reading one of the papers, there was a 13% increase in reflection height overall during a solar eclipse. So I thought those would be two interesting diagnostics that I can do during the eclipse, because both VLF transmitters and tweaks are great tools for understanding the D layer. That's all I have. Back to the net.
Okay. Next on the list, we have Dave, KD0EAG. Go ahead, Dave. Dave, your mic's off, but I don't hear anything. Now he went to a test screen.
While we're waiting, I've got a original grape board and the parts. I'm wondering, once I get the thing assembled, do I align that to magnetic north or true north?
Do you mean a grape receiver or a magnetometer?
A grape receiver.
A grape receiver shouldn't have any direction. That's the HF receiver, right?
No, it's got 3 little magnet sensors on it.
Okay, so you have the magnetometer, ground magnetometer, not a grape. So that you'd want to align to magnetic north.
Yep.
Okay. I've also got a lightning detector. I wonder if I could hook that up with it. What kind of interesting results that might yield.
I
Um,
think we've looked at the lightning detectors before earlier in the project, and we don't think that the depending on what type of lightning detector you have, but if it's kind of one of the standard ones, we didn't think there was too much new science we were able to get out of that. If you're using a VLF receiver like Jonathan Rizzo was just talking about a couple of minutes ago, then there's a lot more information you can get about the lightning, and it would show up in the spectrograms and changes in the and other observations you see.
I want to give Dave Witten another chance to talk. Dave, are you there? Still no audio.
Is this any better?
Yes, now
Much
we can
better.
hear you.
Okay, well, there's always 2 different settings here, and I had used a different one earlier. And then it was going crazy. Zoom just, I don't know, I have really bad trouble with video and audio on this Ubuntu. But anyway, there's really very little to tell. Sorry to cause such a distraction. I've been preoccupied with some other things that have taken a lot of time, but I am plugging away on small projects in the background. So when I have a moment here and there. That's it. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. And next on the list is Noel Pettit, WB0VGI. Go ahead, Noel.
Good evening, everyone. Still plugging away with our SMART project with Peter Chi and UCLA. And we have a number of magnetometers running around the country. And if people are putting their magnetometers up on the cloud or wherever, we have it running to the HamSci cloud. We have it running to the Google. And we also have it running to Adafruit's IO. So that's about it. We had 6 inches of snow over the weekend, and it's mostly gone. So hopefully that'll be the last of our big snow here in Minnesota.
Very good. Next on the list is Tom N5EG. Go ahead, Tom. Oh, Dave, do you have a comment? Oh, he's muted. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, good evening, Dave and the group. Back. It's been a tough couple of weeks. Not too much on the project. I've been exploring the inside of an ICU for about a week. And it's going to take a little while to get back to full swing on the project. I did find, I spent a little time debugging. I have to take debugging in limited time slots, and was able to crash the software, the stack, and the hardware in the FPGA with the code, which is usually really hard to do. And I isolated it down to one function call, which I haven't debugged yet, but with 99% certainty, it's a programmer error in the code. So I've got to debug that. So not so much on the project here the last week or so. I'm back to the group.
Well, glad to see you back, Tom.
Thank you.
And I believe that's everybody on the list. Has anybody jumped in since we started? I guess not. So we're open for general discussion.
Thanks, Dave. Tom sent me a few emails earlier today. I was wondering if I could spend a little bit of time chatting with Tom about them.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go ahead.
All right. So one of the things I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to re-budget. So let me start with the really, there's one email that you sent that was particularly encouraging to me, and I want to make
Okay.
sure I understand this correctly. But it says, this letter was recently sent to FPGA customers, revising and generally improving allocation and lead time status of the FPGAs. It comes via DigiKey. Max 10 comes off allocation at the end of this year. So does that mean that we're going to be able to get as many of these FPGAs as we want in the future?
My interpretation means that they will provide general order for FPGAs. The letter doesn't say what quantity limits are or what customers are prioritized in what order. But my reading of the letter is that in 4Q, the Max 10s will not have severe capacity limits like they've had for the last 3 years.
Okay.
It's not an infinite number, and if they've had 1 million FPGAs back up in the queue, it may take a while to work through the lead time. If the queue is relatively empty, we would have, not too many severe limits. They did not provide quantity tables, so we got to guess right now.
Okay. Well, this sounds very encouraging to me, though, because when the project ends when the grant is up at the end of this year, we said in our grant that we would make 6 prototype of these things.
Yeah.
And I think, the intention of this prototype is that after the prototypes are made, we're able to produce things in, bigger quantities for people who need them, that hopefully it's useful. So it's like, if we just have 6 prototypes of this thing, I don't feel like and we can't make any more at all. I don't feel like it's really useful. But if we're able to make even 1 or 2 working prototypes that are demonstrating, okay, this is actually a good thing, and then we say, oh yeah, we can buy the parts and we actually can produce it for $500 a thing, then I feel like we've really kind of, met the minimum of what we were hoping to do.
Yeah, one of the fine details will be what speed grades are available. Scotty had to build the data engine with a slower speed grade.
Okay.
And I've been on the hairy edge of making timing work with the faster speed grade part. Now, the slower speed grade is a different temperature range, and that may or may not impact us. It's one of the reasons we need a license. We can't do timing analysis on the speed grade part that Scotty was able to put on the data engine unless we have a license.
The part he put on is a wider temperature range, right?
Yeah, but it's technically a slower speed grade.
Well, that's why they are actually the same speed grade, just spec for a wider temperature.
I'm hoping that, in fact, that's exactly the case. But I've been right up against speed grade limits here for quite a while now.
When you say you're right up against speed grade limits, that means you've actually tested it and you're finding that it's missing things, or just based on the specs that you're calculating so far, but it hasn't actually been tested yet.
Yeah, so the last load missed timing by 0.4 nanoseconds at high temperature and is in spec at room temperature. That works. I had another run where I was out by 1 nanosecond at room temperature, and that did not work. And so working and not working is somewhere in between those 2 values of the parameters.
It sounds very marginal.
It's close. It's very close.
Yeah, and that makes sense that if it was out at temperature, it would be okay at room temperature. But if it's out of room temperature, it's definitely out.
Right. So we're fairly close because the difference in utilization between those two was only about 1% or so. Now, if you use up almost all the RAM cells, that 1%, can be a real bad 1%. And if it's logic cells, that 1% might not be too harmful. And so we are close. if it's only temperature range, and we can heat sink and cool the FPGA, we might not face an issue, just like Dave says. So
Mhm.
that's all TBD. So some of the fine points of what's not stated in the letter is, which variants of the part can you get? What pinouts can you get? What speed ranges can you get? That
Mhm.
letter doesn't provide guidance in those points.
Okay. So it sounds like I can't necessarily sleep well at night just yet, but maybe, but maybe
Yeah.
there's some hope.
Exactly. One of the advantages of the license is if you get timing that works, you can freeze that part of the design in
Uh-huh.
terms of layout and fitting. And then when you add new stuff, it doesn't undo previously working timed parts.
Okay.
Doesn't mean the new stuff that you add will time, but it does mean that if you've got timing working on an old portion of the layout, you can at least cast that part in fitting concrete. And so the license there helps out a bit.
Okay.
So
Great.
generally, I take that as good news. The worst news could have been our suppliers discontinued the process node and you can't buy anything. And,
Yeah.
and it didn't say that. So there is a lot of good news in that letter.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that other scenario you were talking about where they're discontinuing it, that's actually something I've really been worried about. So
Yeah. So TSMC, in their earlier letter, wanted folks off of 55 nanometer, off of any process larger than 28, because they probably have capacity constraints at their factory, and they're trying to move their factory to the more recent process nodes.
right.
And so what we don't know is, have they decided to continue manufacturing 55 nanometer?
Mhm.
Or have they found somebody who's agreed to take that process node and transition it to their factory? We don't have information on that.
Yeah. Well, at least this letter is providing some sort of hope, because
Yeah.
I am really hopeful. What I'm really hopeful can happen is I'm hoping that the Tangerine will be able to operate meet spec and basically work as like a plug-in replacement to like an Edis N200.
Yeah. So I think I would interpret that letter as mostly good news.
Okay, that's good. Because the other alternative is, my wife, worked as a process engineer. I was trying to convince her to turn our barn, which we're not using at all right now, just trying to convince her to turn it into a 55 nanometer fab
There you
to
go.
take care of our
Okay.
chip shortage. We could use a frog pond out there for cooling.
Yeah, there you go.
Something told me that wasn't going to be the most viable plan, but we were getting desperate.
I know people who work at Global Foundries here in New York. Maybe they can catch some stuff going out the loading dock.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is good news, Tom. So there's
Yes.
that letter you sent us, and then
Yeah.
there's the other email you sent us, which was the list of things that we think that you recommended. And so I'll share this one as well, and perhaps
Okay.
other people can comment on it. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get a list of things that I need to spend money on between now and the end of the year, that we need in order to actually make this Tangerine work. So the first two things, we've got the node locked license for the Max 10 FPGA and the floating licenses for the ARIA. So a couple comments on this. With the ARIA, technically the ARIA FPGA would be for the version 2 of the Tangerine, which really isn't technically covered by this particular grant.
Okay.
So if the if that costs extra money, I'm not sure that it makes sense for me to buy that on this grant.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
and I also
You
I
and
also
Scotty
know,
can talk about how you want to divvy that up.
yeah, but I also know that Tapper has a ARDC grant to buy those licenses.
Okay.
So there's that. Now the other thing is, what's the difference? So I understand a node locked license is a license for one particular computer. Is it in the floating license is one that can be checked out? Is it possible to get like a floating license for version 20.1 or like,
Yes. Yeah,
yes,
the key question that I have is, my understanding from talking to Scotty is that a node locked license continues to function after 1 year
okay,
at whatever version you had installed, on the day prior to the license timing out.
okay,
And so that essentially gets you a perpetual license for whatever version it was on the date that it expired.
right,
Okay, I don't know how the floating licenses work. If the
okay.
floating license, is perpetual or is a useless thing after a year, I don't know. The
So I have,
license, yeah, go ahead.
so I have to talk to the Intel rep about that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Now, the way
Okay.
the license, my understanding, the way the license works is that when you have a license, you can install any version that's currently supported. And
Mm-hmm.
what that means is anything from the latest version back through supported versions, and supported versions are those that have active FPGAs still in production, supported by that version.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, 20.1 supports the Max 10s, and the Max 10s are currently in production. So 20.1 is a currently supported license.
Okay.
If you go back to like 15 and 16, you may find those to be unsupported licenses because they supported parts that have since gone out of production. So you have to look through the table to find out what's a currently supported license. And if you go back early enough in time, you won't be able to use them. But I thought the project might want to have a license that can be used, for example, on Tangerine and Max 10, that once the 1 year expiration hits, you still got a license you can use in the future past that.
I agree with that. So I think for me, the question for the rep would be, is that true of the floating licenses too?
Yes,
Because
exactly.
I know when I was at Virginia Tech and we were using IDL, which is this other data analysis language that you had to pay for a license for, we had floating license servers for that. And but the floating license was node locked to a particular server, but even after you continue to pay even after you stop paying the maintenance, as long as that server existed, you didn't have any problem.
Yeah, if
And-
that is a true statement for the Intel tools,
Mhm.
then I would basically change that from node lock plus floating to all floating.
I agree with that. I should also note that I remember that I've learned this through a very stressful time in my graduate student career, when I also learned that if you have a rack of servers, you can often have 220 volts going up the side of the rack and not 120. And I remember taking our node locked IDL license server that did not have a current maintenance contract and connecting it to the 220 volt line without switching over the power supply. And we saw smoke come out of the power supply. And as I said, it was a very stressful afternoon. But fortunately, it was repaired with a simple $80 power supply that we were able to buy from the downtown computer shop.
Yeah, and hopefully your license wasn't checking the serial number of the power supply.
No, it was not checking the serial number of the power supply. But if the motherboard were fried, I would have been in trouble.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, exactly. So, so with the proviso of the Intel sales rep advising you, I would agree totally with you on that.
Okay, because my intention would be to, I think my intention would be to get these floating licenses, put them onto a Linode that I have control over, and then use that Linode to distribute the licenses to people working on the project, whether they're within the university or outside of the university.
Okay, a question, does a Linode ever change its serial number identity?
That's a great question. So I guess that's also something I can talk to the rep about.
Yeah,
If it does, I can, I do have some actual honest to goodness physical servers at the university that I could potentially put it on, but gaining access to those requires anyone who's not already in the university, they have to go through a process where they have a background check done and have to give they basically become like, it's called a non-employee university affiliate, and they have to go through HR and get all that stuff. And then they have
Yeah.
to do the duo authentication and the whole 9 yards. So
yeah. If you put license on Linode, I would recommend running a daemon called fail2 ban on
Oh,
that
yeah.
on that server.
that blocks repeated like SSH attempts and things, right?
Yeah, what it does is if you can set the thresholds, but if a single IP address exceeds, 4 failed attempts to log in,
Right,
that IP gets banned for some period of time, but other
right,
IPs still work.
right. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. So yeah, we could use that. Yeah. Okay, so that gives me some good questions to talk to the Intel rep. As I said, Scotty gave me the name and phone number of the person today. I left a
Okay.
message, but haven't heard back yet. So
Okay.
I will. So then the next item on the list, you have a high quality HF signal generator with excellent linear output cleanliness for linearity testing.
Right.
And you said we need 2 of those. Do you have
Yeah.
a recommendation for which ones to buy?
That is probably a good question to run by ARRL lab.
Okay.
The gold standard for many years was the HP 8640, which hadn't been made in about 40 years, but everybody likes that one the best. The
Yeah.
key is you want to be able to passively sum 2 amplifiers to produce an extremely wide dynamic range 2-tone signal. And if you can do that even up into UHF and VHF, it's a generally useful test setup for any receiver at all in terms of linearity.
Okay.
Here's a question. I mean, this sounds like a stupid joke, but it might work. Should we look for one of those at Dayton? One of those HP, if we can find one that works?
The 8640s they're manufactured with 3 or 4 different kinds of unobtainium. And the people who work on them are equally unobtainiable. But you may be able to find a couple surplus. The 8640 is, probably the best or one of the best. There are newer generators available. And I'm not the expert in those, but there are some folks at ARRL. Ed Hare probably can point you to a couple, that might survive the aged hams.
By
and
the
dreams
way,
of living.
I have a working 8640. We have one in our lab, and I actually also own a 8644, which is a really high end one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did some linearity testing last year, and I borrowed an 8640, and it just totally outclassed my rubidium 5 ways to Sunday in terms of cleanliness.
Well, an 8640 is a pretty old instrument, and it's kind of hokey to work with.
It is.
But they are, as you say, they've got good output cleanliness. The 8644 is also a gold standard.
Yeah.
Synthesized. 8640 isn't synthesized. It's a dial it in.
Yeah. It's I think it has a microwave cavity that's phase
Right.
locked and mixed down.
Yeah, it has a way of
divided
phase
down.
locking it to an external reference, but
Yeah. So
how much
but they are.
do you have some idea of how much 2 of these things would cost?
Well, the 8640s back in the 1970s were around $5,000-6,000. In today's dollars, you can find them less than that.
Well, I just on a quick search found one that is probably in good good shape for
Well,
700.
what about buying something new that's more modern?
Yeah, there, I haven't studied which ones might make a reasonable.
Yeah,
you know,
that
it's-
is a really good question, Nathaniel, that they make a lot of cheap ones, but finding ones that have this the signal cleanliness is we go to the old stuff.
Yeah, yeah, the 8640s are something like 110 dB of third order down. They're really, really exceptional boxes. But
Yeah.
I believe there are newer boxes available that can do that. I just don't know what they are. And we ought to put the feelers out to, Adam Parson and Ed Hare would probably be two guys to ask that question.
Well, Ed
Yeah.
was just at the Hamside workshop, as you know, and he was very friendly to us. So he'd probably give us a good recommendation if I
Ye-
write him a quick email.
He'd be a guy I'd ask because I think he's been through the testing, and I think his opinion would carry a lot of weight.
John
Yeah,
Ackerman might, I know he's top on the time side. Maybe I think he's pretty good on the frequency side too.
Yeah. So that gets you third order linearity, receiver spurious. There's a whole bunch of key parameters that those two get you. That even past Tangerine can provide benefit in VHF and UHF projects as well.
Yeah. Stevenson. Let me draft up a quick email here.
Yeah.
So let's see.
And before you finish it, we can talk about item 4 on the list.
Yes, I will do that. So I'll start writing about item 3 and then we can add item 4. I have a question for you. We are working on the development and testing of the Tangerine SDR receiver. Tom N5EG is recommending that we purchase 2. I'll just copy this.
Yeah, you can change HF to HF plus VHF plus UHF.
HF plus VHF plus
Yeah, that's 640.
UHF.
8640 goes way high.
Yeah.
Okay.
To a
Tom
gig or so.
N5EG is recommending that we
500.
purchase 2 high quality HF plus VHF plus UHF signal generators with excellent linear output cleanliness for linearity testing of the Tangerine SDR receivers. Do you have any recommendations on our Telecon tonight? Many people said the old standby is the HP 8640, but it would be nice to have something that is more modern and up to date. Do you? I leave it right there. Okay. And then we can go on to the next point.
Okay. Yeah, the other one I think that's going to be very useful and will outlive Tangerine as well. It's a calibrated noise source used for noise figure measurements.
Also, do you have any recommendations for a calibrated HF, VHF, UHF noise source to measure receiver noise figure?
There's some of those available. I think you'll find the HP noise sources from like used from, there's a place in Florida that sells used equipment. And
Yeah,
does
they can be
calibration.
quite expensive though.
Yeah, they're going to be there. It's going to be expensive.
There are other ways of testing noise figure that use generators rather than noise sources. So
okay.
Well, and what do people?
Yeah, that's the sort.
What do you consider expensive?
Less than $1,000, I would say.
Okay.
Well, Yeah, that's the sort of thing there, and they're
Okay.
asking $500 for it.
And it's sold out.
Yeah. less than $1,000.
Yeah,
I don't consider. I'm considering things expensive right now. Like, I'm hoping that I could get this. If I could get this for like $1,000 to $2,000 each, that would be really nice.
yeah.
We're not gonna do that.
I'm not gonna do that. Oh, we'll see. I'll look at my budgets. So, and then miscellaneous passive or active HF signal generator combiner for linearity measurements.
Yeah, that generally, that is not expensive in parts. It may be expensive in time to fabricate it. There's a whole bunch of ways to build those. The parts cost isn't high,
Are
depending on what you're trying to
talking,
accomplish.
are you just talking a splitter combiner?
Yeah, a hybrid
Passive?
combiner that provides some generator to generator isolation.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, they're not hard.
all those splitters do that.
Yeah, I
You get
mean-
one from mini circuits or something, they're pretty good quality.
Yeah, that's not expensive.
No.
And depending on the isolation, off the shelf will do it some. You can home brew it. I used the 3 resistor combiner when I did my testing, and of course, it had inadequate generator to generator isolation. So the
Yeah.
generators talked to each other through the combiner, and you
Right.
could see it.
Here's a whole list of parts from DigiKey.
It all depends on the frequency range you're looking for.
Yeah,
I've
so
got a
the-
whole bunch that are in the HF to low VHF range.
Yeah, you'll probably need a separate HF and up above, because the HF ones, the low HF ones need bigger transformers and
Yeah,
they have more strays and things. So they're not too expensive. And you'll probably want to get a small collection for the lab.
Okay. I think I have a few. I've got a few splitters. Well, these splitters and combiners, if they're passive, is it reciprocal?
yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so like something like this would be appropriate then.
right,
Yes.
right. Yeah, you need to make sure they're 50 ohms in and out. Almost all of them are 50 ohms.
Right.
Yeah,
I
those kind work pretty well.
yeah, I mean I selected that over because you can choose 50 or 75 ohms here.
Yeah.
And then it's connectorized. So
Yeah, you may need, a couple of dB padding between the generator and the splitter combiner.
Okay.
Depending on, how much of a match you need. But that's
Uh,
all, those are all inexpensive. I just lumped all that stuff together in one
Yeah.
line item.
One of the
Okay.
harder things to get is switched attenuators.
Yeah,
Those are,
yeah.
Um,
I didn't add that. I assumed most labs would have those. That may be a bad assumption. I generally have a 10 dB per step and a 1 dB per step attenuator in series, and those give really excellent results.
yeah,
If they're good attenuators, and they go up to UHF.
yeah. I have
So
a
it-
number of that
it's-
sort and the K switched ones.
So it sounds like for this part here, if I budget, say like, $500 or so for miscellaneous parts, that would cover this line.
The question, Dave brings
Yeah.
up a good question about the cost of step attenuators.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of labs have got, a closet full of those tucked away.
Yeah.
But if you had to buy them, I don't know what they would cost, quite frankly.
A couple of years ago, I actually bought a whole set of like various attenuators and pads, and
Okay,
so I think we actually might have a start of those already.
Yeah, you may
okay.
be okay on that.
Yeah. And I may have some more. I did buy a bunch of splitters as well. I may have some more of those. I think that, so I think these random parts, I think I won't have too much trouble finding money for those things. I
Okay.
think I think perhaps these two the rest here, I kind of really need to make sure I have kind of line items for.
Right.
And I think, so this I have to talk to the Cordis guy, and then this, I think getting some input from Ed would be helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other guy to copy on the email is Adam Parson, VA7OJ. Although you might get too much information.
Why don't we just start with Ed?
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Because
So this list was focused on receiver. I didn't add anything for transmitter testing.
Oh, I think that's fine because this grant only specifies the receiver.
Okay.
So like at this point for this grant, we just need to do a good enough job on this grant to like get through the receiver, get a good receiver working, anything like that. Because
Yeah.
the grant, we're on our no cost extension. It ends in December. I do hope to continue the project in the future, and maybe do these other things, but I think those would have to be new proposals and, future. So
Okay.
I think just keeping this focused, keeping it focused just on the max 10, keeping it focused just on the receiver, making
Yeah.
sure we get that right. And then we can figure out the rest on a different future grant or whatever.
Yeah. ARRL, I think, wrote a paper on receiver testing. And I don't know if that paper covers this subject area. You might ask Ed if he knows about that paper. He might be the author for all I know.
Okay. Maybe we'll follow up with him on that. We'll get this first and
Okay.
yeah, we'll get him involved. I'm CCing Majid on here as well.
Yeah,
So.
this will give you a good start for a receiver test lab.
Okay, that's really good. Yeah, because I don't think I have one of these. I don't have these, I think. Great.
A couple of comments. Steve Ford had a podcast for a while, ARRL podcast, and Ed was on there quite a bit, and they were talking about receiver testing in there some. He explained some of the different processes.
Yeah.
But also, I have a step attenuator I'll give you to help you get in the right ballpark. It's an HF like the one that was put out in QEX recently. I built several of those, and I can just give you one of those.
Hmm.
Oh, I like this article about the ARRL lab. Ulrich Road donated the signal generator to the laboratory.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Well,
Ulrich Road of Road and Schwartz.
yeah. So if
Yeah.
it's probably the appropriate RNS generator.
Yeah.
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 and you can trade that for a couple of automobiles, probably.
Yeah.
I said it was about 10,000, but yeah.
I got to meet Ulrich over at NJIT once they had him over there, and yeah, he sent me a copy of his recent software receiver book.
Right.
He's a very nice guy.
Yeah, it's great. He's outgoing because you see him on the bands all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've made contact more than once.
He's super nice. Yeah, 10,000 per unit. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting because I do have a reasonable amount of money to spend. The question is deciding what the appropriate way to spend it is.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to figure out right now. I do have some money to spend here, but I do have to make sure I figure out the right way to spend it.
I tried to prioritize the order there. I think, the licenses have to be the high priority.
Licenses are of course top priority because there's no other way to supply those. The rest of that stuff, many of us have.
Another thought here is that I guess one thought is you could rent this stuff because it's a short-term need potentially. But then another idea is to
That's
just
true
get
too.
ARRL
Yeah.
lab to help you with the testing, maybe.
That's true. There are a lot of ways, but I think given the way grants work and the benefit to the university, if we could figure out ways to, actually have the university acquire these things and set up a lab there, I think there's a long-term benefit there beyond just renting. Because I think even after this grant expires, there's still going to be possibility to work on not only the Tangerine, but other systems. And we're going to keep having students and keeping it's going to make a lot of sense to try to
Yeah.
get the lab set up.
You're going to
right.
be working on radios for a while, so
I certainly hope
get the
so.
equipment.
I'm hoping not to go anyway.
You have to be very careful not to damage some of this stuff. Very expensive and easily damaged. You can hook it up to 220 accidentally. And
Yeah, you don't want to.
Well, that's the difference with modern equipment. They don't have to switch them.
I know. No, that was
They're
embarrassing.
universal
But
power.
I learned something that day,
Uh-huh.
and I haven't forgotten it. Oh, so that's good. Okay, well, thank you, Tom. That
bet.
was super helpful. I really appreciate it. I'll work on following up on that.
Okay.
I guess we're getting close to our time. So
Yeah, I'm about ready to
Yeah.
conk out here. So
that's
I
good.
think I will-
We should talk to we don't have to talk about tonight, but maybe next week. I see Dylan came on. I should figure out how much we need to allocate for cases for these things. That's another aspect. And yeah. And Jonathan, did you find out if Morris is going to Cedar or not? I don't know. Jonathan, are you there? He might have stepped away from the computer, so I guess I'll reach out to him another time.
Yeah.
I
And, of course, a number of us are going to Dayton and keep an eye out for some of these pieces of equipment if you'd like.
That sounds great. So, yes,
I'll be
I will
out there.
be. That sounds good. And yeah, I'll be at Dayton too. So, yeah, and that'll be great. So you can keep an eye out for that equipment there. Equipment hunting is never something I've been very good at Dayton, because but yeah, if people want to keep an eye out for that stuff, that would be good.
Yeah, we also have Nearfest, as we call it, the Northeast New England flea market coming right up. But it's not usually so hot on the equipment side. But I can keep an eye out. The one that's locally, in the Northeast or New England, that's very good for equipment is the MIT flea, which will have just started up.
Yeah.
If you not have any contacts over in the Boston area.
That sounds good. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to I probably will be missing the Grape Telecon this week because we're having a high school science competition at Scranton that I'm helping out with. But that's done by 3 p.m. So I should be good for the Grape Telecon, or the Festival of Eclipse Atmospheric Science Telecon at 4. So great. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
73.
73.
Good night, all.
Good night.
7